Hey everyone, welcome to our very first episode of Thriving Loudly. I'm Aiesha.
And I'm Trenise.
And we are so excited to launch this. I mean, it's been a long time coming, and we're really excited to share our personal experiences with you guys and our insights with entrepreneurship, wellness, and we're going to get real. We're going to get real with our talks. So we're so excited.
Yeah, we are. And so we really created Thriving Loudly because we wanted to create a safe space for, BIPOC individuals, women of color, where they could really have a space that they feel like that they're being seen and that they're being heard. So as Aiesha, spoke about, we're definitely going to be covering, entrepreneurship, but also health, wellness, the whole gamut. And so we're excited to bring this to you.
Yeah, so on today's episode, we're just going to kind of talk about our backgrounds, you guys, kind of getting to know us on a deeper level. I'm sure some of you guys know a little bit about me, and if you've been following me on social media, I have created like Arizona Places. I do a lot of local stuff, but this is going to be a great opportunity for you guys to get to know my co-host Trenise and kind of our why behind this and like what to expect moving forward.
Yeah, so grab your coffee, tea, wine, whatever it is that you like to enjoy. No judgment. And let's dive on in.
All right, let's get right into it. Trenise, tell me a little bit about your upbringing. Like, how did you grow up in a predominantly white space? I know you mentioned that you grew up in Wisconsin. How was that experience? How did it shape you as a person? And, what are just kind of some takeaways from that experience now that you're now living in Arizona?
Yes, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The way that Milwaukee, Wisconsin is, I know some people have heard of this, some people haven't, but back in the days, it used to be very segregated. I know things have changed, now, things have evolved and things like that. But it was very much so that you had your African-American people that were more like in inner city. And then you had, your Caucasians, more like in the suburbs area. You had your, Hispanics, Latinos on the south side. And that's pretty much how the dynamic, was growing up. So when I was in, elementary school, growing up as a kid, I was surrounded by, majority, Black people. And as I got older and I went to middle school, my mom had actually moved us over to the south side. So I got more exposure to, Hispanics and Latinos. And I was with now predominantly, Hispanics and Latinos and, had a lot of friends and things like that. And then I actually went to a high school that was on the south side as well. So growing up, it has really just, made me realize the importance of diversity in culture and how much I've always wanted more of that growing up in, a space like, or a state like Wisconsin, where I think it's only Wisconsin, sprinkle of Green Bay, sprinkle of Madison, sprinkle of Racine, and what's the other, and Kenosha, where it's like predominantly white people. Now, mind you, there are 60 cities, I believe it's 60. Don't quote me, guys. If it's different, let me know. But I believe it's 60 cities in Wisconsin. And out of all of the 60 cities, there's only about 3 of the cities where there are Black people in it. So as you can imagine, that could shape anybody's reality, right?
Yeah.
But as I got older and as I was able to, mixed with other cultures and things like that, it just made me really appreciate diversity and really see that diversity is very important and how much, it can really shape your identity.
Like you were talking about shaping your identity as a person, but do you feel like it held you back as a person?
Yeah, I don't feel like it held me back, but I think that it helped me realize that I wanted to see more diversity. So growing up as a kid, when you're surrounded by, people that look like you, but also you're in a predominantly white state. It's kind of hard to maneuver. It's kind of hard to identify with that. You feel like, are you in the right place? I didn't grow up in Texas. I didn't grow up in Atlanta, so it's not like I saw white attorneys or doctors or Black attorneys or doctors or anything like that. So I don't know. It just changed my perspective a lot. So now moving here and being in Arizona, I still very much feel the same way of how I grew up in Wisconsin, because it's still pretty much the same dynamic.
Absolutely. And then I do have a question to kind of bounce off of that. I know you decided to move to Arizona, and it's a state it's growing. And, you know, I'm born and raised, you know, from here. I grew up in Tucson, and, you know, I've seen such a change in the last decade, especially in Phoenix, with, you know, the amount of, you know, different people moving here, you know, the cultural change, it's shifting, it's slowly shifting. But why did you choose to move to Arizona knowing you came from Wisconsin, and then coming here knowing that this was going to probably more than likely be the same experience?
Same dynamic.
Why not go to Texas or Atlanta or LA, you know, or somewhere where there's more of that population? Why Arizona if you were trying to seek that?
Right. Yeah. That's a great question.
Yeah.
I actually did live in Atlanta for 6 months.
Okay.
We moved there just for a second. We didn't like it, so we moved back. And I lived in Texas too for 2 years.
Oh, nice.
Because I wanted diversity. So I did get that whole experience in Houston. My mom lived there for 11 years. So I was able to see that dynamic. But what made me move to Arizona is because I guess maybe this was still a level of comfort for me. I came out here and spiritually, you know, it spoke to me. And I've always wanted to live on the West Coast. And I figured, well, you know, I lived in an environment like this back home, so it's not out of reach. You know, sometimes they say that, you know, you stick to what you're familiar with. And I think that's very much so here, because when I look at Wisconsin and I look at Arizona, they're very similar in a lot of ways. Now, here in Arizona, this is a little bit more, I would say, more elevated. And, you know, being in Wisconsin it's the Midwest, so it's very basic, minimum, but still kind of the same hometown feel, small town feel, same dynamic. And so that's what made me move here.
Okay, yeah, that's really good. And I, you know, I love that you brought that up, because, you know, I really don't think it's talked about enough in regards to, you know, I see it all over TikTok, you know, you know, I'm on Arizona TikTok a lot, and people always have something to say about something about Arizona, whether it's the traffic, people moving here, the lack of diversity, or just some other craziness, you know. And then obviously I review food and restaurants, so I see a lot of that on my For You page as well. I do see a lot of people, you know, talking about the lack of diversity in Arizona and Phoenix, you know, specifically, which Phoenix is the most diverse city in Arizona. Like, you go anywhere else, you'll see the real Arizona. It's crazy. It's a crazy difference.
And this is for real.
It's a crazy difference. I've been to all the small towns here in Arizona, and Phoenix is definitely the most diverse, and it's very, you know, it's very much a city. It's the 5th largest city. It's becoming so diverse, so big, and it's growing so fast. But I see it all the time with people saying that there's no diversity here, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, and I agree, it's not going to be in Atlanta. It's not going to be, you know, a Chicago or, you know, Houston and stuff like that. And, you know, it's Phoenix, you know, I mean, and I think that a lot of that, you know, again, people have to move for their jobs, right? People have to move, and it is what it is. But I think that, you know, coming here knowing that would be the potential reality, I always, you know, I always would want to tell people, like, you know, this is Phoenix. It's going to be different. Don't expect it to be in Atlanta, a Houston, or any of that. It's very different. That's like me going to somewhere else, or Miami. Like, it's like me going to Miami and expecting it to be a Scottsdale. You know, it's different. You know, it's different. Or me expecting Houston to be a Scottsdale or whatever, you know. It is very, very different. But
I think that's the beauty in it.
It is.
There's a lot of opportunity for us.
A lot of opportunity.
And that's one thing that drew me here too. And that's what I enjoy. Like, I like being the first of. I like being in spaces where you have, like, you're using your paintbrush and you can paint and create it the way that you want it.
Absolutely.
To, so.
And I'm seeing
another reason why.
Exactly.
I love living here.
I agree with you. And I'm seeing so many Black-owned businesses opening up left and right. Just I think just this past week I saw Black-owned coffee shop open up in Chandler. There's also the Warren Supper Club I saw that opened up in Chandler, which is kind of like similar vibes to a place that just recently opened up in Scottsdale called Shiv. So I'm seeing a lot of, businesses,
I didn't know Shiv was Black-owned.
Shiv's not Black-owned, but Warren Supper Club is Black-owned. So it's kind of like, they're kind of the same kind of concept, which is really cool. So I'm excited to try Warren out. I'm going to have to try it out very soon. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot of growth. I think it's really exciting.
I agree. Can you share how it's been, growing up in Arizona? I know you're originally from Tucson, and even just the difference between Tucson to Phoenix, just having that difference. What has your experience been?
Yeah. So I'm born and raised from Tucson. I come from several generations that have lived in Arizona. So a lot of my family, my parents born and raised here. My grandparents, some of them actually came from the East Coast and stuff like that, but military and stuff like that. But yeah, aunts, uncles, majority of my first, I don't know the name of it, but that first set of cousins, and first set of aunts and uncles, they're all born and raised from here. And overall, I grew up in very white spaces, especially in Tucson. It really, at the time, really wasn't diverse when I was growing up in the 2000s and the late 90s. And so I always knew I was different. I always knew that I was a Black girl, and I had my struggles, but I felt like overall, I had a really good group of friends, in high school and even in middle school, and I always felt like I belonged. I never felt like an outsider, and I'm very lucky and blessed that I never really felt like I don't fit in, or this is very weird, or this is very odd. Which was good. And I think also just having very supportive family who always just really encouraged me. They're like, you're smart, you're beautiful, go after your dreams, don't let anything hold you back. And I feel like that really shaped me to be like, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go try out for this. I'm going to go start this. And I never felt like, oh, I don't know if I can because of who I am, or because of the way I looked, which I'm very grateful for. As I grew up and got into high school and got into college, and I started to have more of a diverse friend group, and started to really kind of see how other people grew up and what their personal struggles were, whether it was racism and just all the things, it really opened my eyes to what their reality is and can be, for people that look like us. Well, I overall felt like no matter where I'm at in life or what I'm doing, I'm just going to continue to thrive and go after everything I want to go after. And so I always felt that, coming from Tucson to Phoenix, there was a little bit of a difference. I felt the difference was, seeing the cultural shift happening in Phoenix, seeing how progressive Phoenix was getting and growing, and there was more Black spaces, because in Tucson, even trying to get your hair done,
I was going to ask you about that.
there was just no way. There wasn't people who knew how to do hair.
So
at all.
Who did your hair? How did you get your hair done?
I mean, I was doing a lot of wigs back in the day, and then and there were some people that knew how to do hair, but not good hair, the good bust down sew-ins and hair. You weren't finding that in Tucson. I mean, luckily it's starting to happen. Shout out to Keonta. She owns a shop out in Tucson, and they're doing great things, for Black women, and
have to get there.
And she has her own head spa too. So I really thought that was really cool. And it's starting, because I'm like, dang, this wasn't here when I was growing up. I'm like, I needed services like that, and they just really were hard and rare to find, for sure.
Did you ever feel like you have to shrink yourself? I know you said that, your parents did a great job of raising you where you never really felt like an outcast or anything like that. Do you remember a time where you feel like you did have to shrink yourself amongst maybe your friend group, or if you were in college, or any situation like that? Or do you always feel like you were proud of who you were and, being a Black woman, or just even now? too,
No, I don't really feel like I have to shrink myself to be accepted. I never really dealt with it. I dealt with insecurities, but it wasn't because of just being a Black woman. It was just like, I look back on how I felt about like maybe my body, or, like, oh, I want to change this about my face. It was just like more, I guess, aesthetic things that I was worried about, as a teenager and even a young adult. I was, worried about my weight and wanting to look good and stuff like that.
I hear you.
But, the struggles with being a young girl, that we all deal with, the insecurities. But I never really felt like I had to shrink myself because of my skin or because I was a Black woman. Yeah. I knew who I was, but I never felt like I had to, really. Yeah.
I would say the same for me too. Yeah. The good thing about me is I was surrounded by a lot of African Americans and things like that with my family. So I feel like I've always had great role models, and I've always just been proud of who I am. And being so close to Chicago, being from the Midwest, I was able to always go over to Chicago and see people that look like me. That was always like the inspiration. So that was like one of the places I've always wanted to live, was Chicago, because it was like Chicago had everything that, and anybody that's from Wisconsin, they know this and they feel the same way. It's like Chicago has everything that we want, and so you go over there, it's like you have a good time. It's like, oh, I want to live here. And then you go back across, because it's only about an hour and a half drive. So growing up, going back and forth to Chicago, and being around my family and friends and things like that, it just made me just embrace who I am and be happy to be who I am. So I don't think I've ever dealt with that either. Like you said, insecurities that you would typically have, which are normal, but feeling like you have to shrink, no. And I wouldn't encourage anyone to feel like that they have to shrink. Be comfortable with who you are. I know it is a journey, and I know sometimes we can feel insecure, but never shrink who you are, because everybody is unique, and God created you the way that you're supposed to be for a reason. So never question that or doubt that. So how would you say that growing up in the environment that you grew up in, being from Arizona, shaped the way that you navigate the world today? I would say for me, it's brought awareness to me. Like I said, I didn't grow up living in Chicago or Atlanta or anything like that. So it's helped me to be able to see both worlds, and I think to have a broader perspective, and also to have appreciation and see things, like be able to see things, I think, in a different lens than some people can. I think when you grow up in spaces where it's not a lot of people that look like you, you can either look at it as, what is the glass half empty or the glass half full. And I always try to look at things with the glass half full rather than empty, and look at, okay, well, these are opportunities of how I can be original in this space, how I can be different, how I can stand out. So in terms of it shaping me and how I am today, I think it's always helped me to progress further, because I've always been the one of, that's how I became a branch manager at the age of 28, because I was in a predominantly white, I worked at a predominantly white bank. It was only 10 of us throughout the whole company. There was 300 employees. Wow. Only 10 of us. But because of that, because I stood out, I was able to rise above the ranks, and so that's my story. It's being in these spaces and being able to navigate, it helped me to honestly really excel. And that's why I think that I'm where I am. If I grew up in Atlanta, if I grew up in Houston, I'm not sure if I would have been able to progress so fast. Yeah. But I stood out. Yeah. And I use that to my advantage. Yeah. And that was like an aha moment as I'm telling you this. I didn't even really realize that, but that's the truth. Yeah. Yeah.
I agree with that. No, I see it as the same way, the glass half full, and I see it as an opportunity. Yeah. I see it as an opportunity to excel and be, the one of, right? And I think even when it comes to the influencer space, when I first started over a decade ago, there really wasn't any local Black creators that I could look up to or anything. I wanted to do it because I wanted to do it. And, it's really cool to see even that space grow. And, I get questions all the time on I want to start, but, how is it being a Black content creator locally in Arizona, and I get a lot of those questions, and I feel like it's an opportunity. The space is wide open. I actually have a good friend who's also an influencer who lived in Atlanta, and she says, like, influencer world out there, cutthroat. It is,
I believe it,
very saturated because there's so many of us doing it, doing the same type of content out there. And so when she moved out here, she's like, you know, it was an opportunity because I wasn't getting opportunities in Atlanta because I was one of many. You know, they have so many to pick from, right? And they're going to pick from, they're probably the top girls that are doing it and killing it. And so for the ones who are smaller creators who are starting out, it's harder, you know, because there's so many people who are starting, you know, content creation. And so when she moved out here, she noticed she was getting, you know, brand deals, opportunities, local gigs, because she could be kind of like a blueprint, right? You know, she could do it. And so that was kind of her sentiment to it. And I was like, you know, that does make sense, right? Because when there isn't a lot of people doing the same things as you, I mean, it's harder to stand out, really, you know? So, but yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. I think it's great.
So what advice would you give someone, like in a similar environment, who's struggling to feel seen or feel heard, or maybe they feel like, you know, this is difficult for me. Maybe they came from Atlanta and now they're living here in Arizona and they're like, I'm not used to this. You know, what type of advice would you give them being a native here?
I would just be open-minded. I would be, you know, you're in a new environment, be open-minded, don't be closed off, be welcoming, be open to getting to know different people from all walks of life, right? And, you know, I think that is the beauty of going anywhere, going to any place, right? If I went to NYC, it's a cultural difference. You know, it's a big melting pot. I love New York, one of my favorite cities, but it is different, you know, and just be open-minded to learn and, you know, get to know other people who may not look like you, and don't just close the door. Be like, you know what, I'm here. I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to explore. I'm going to do my thing. And I'm not going to be afraid, because I don't really feel like there isn't anything to be afraid of. I think just go for it and just have fun. And there's so many groups popping up, you know, locally. And, you know, we'll maybe add some in the show notes here. You know, if you're looking for, you know, Black events and, you know, Black spaces, and even other BIPOC spaces.
You do a great job of sharing them.
I appreciate that.
And her broadcasting channel, she always shares them. And,
I love that. I want to, you know, share as many things, you know, with my audience as much as you know, as much as I can. And so, you know, we'll link some awesome, you know, social clubs and stuff that I personally love. I think that they're doing a really great job. So if you want to get into that scene and, you know, be in the local scene, you know, it will be great. And, you know, we'll help you out with that.
Yeah, I think for me, I would definitely say, just be open, you know, be open, accept everybody. You just never know. You can never judge a book by its cover. And I think that's been my biggest advice for myself, is just to be open. And I'm open to everybody. It doesn't matter what you look like or what you sound like or anything like that. And I think when you do that, then you'll start to see your whole world open up. And so that's what I would leave everybody with.
Absolutely. Okay, all right, we're going to fast forward to adulthood, and we both ended up on these kind of entrepreneurial paths in our both ways. We're very similar but different, and it's kind of scary to take a leap of faith. It's really scary to go out there and start a business and, you know, start creating content or whatever, you know. It's hard. It can be very intimidating. So with that being said, what made you decide to take the leap into entrepreneurship, and what's been the biggest challenge so far?
Well, I will say that I have been in entrepreneurship for quite some time. My first launch into entrepreneurship was actually through my ex-boyfriend. He was an entrepreneur, and he's the one that kind of like opened my mind to entrepreneurship. So being with him, creating multiple businesses was kind of like that spark of me wanting to dive really into it. And then also I had started a skincare line, an all-natural, vegan, friendly, toxic-free skincare line, which all my people, my friends and families, my real supporters, they know that journey and everything like that. But what made me start that was just because I'm all about health, wellness, and I had been using like several products. Even like at the age of 15, I was making my own skincare products, hair care products, just like mashing up bananas and mixing it with honey and, creating all these different face masks. And so my ex, he actually had a background in chemistry. And so we were able to like just sit down and put some products together. And that's how I started that skincare line. And so it was a really good hit. I ended up getting it into local retailers in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee. Yep. So we did really good. And then also I was featured in, what was it? Entrepreneur magazine. They have like this pitch show where you can go on and pitch your products. And I was also on MSNBC. I forgot the name of it, but it was another pitch show. So I got some national coverage behind it, and it did really well. But then COVID happened. So I was working with a manufacturer, and prices just began to go up, and things were closing. And so once COVID happened, once the world shut down, didn't know what the future was going to look like. So I decided to put that on a pause. But I did that for 5 years, and I knew doing that I wanted to stay in entrepreneurship because it gave me the freedom and flexibility that I enjoy. I was able to birth something and actually bring it into creation. I had a team that I was working with. It was like really a big deal, and I was doing really big things. So I knew, and this was at the age of 25 that I was doing this. 25 is when I started it. So I knew like, okay, I want to stay on this path. I don't want to work a 9-to-5 job. But unfortunately, when I put that on pause, I had to go back to a job. And that's when I got back into banking. And I know I'm kind of going around with my story, you guys, but I got back into banking because I have a background in banking. But with that, I was able to rise above the ranks. And again, became branch manager by the time I was 28, and still doing the skincare, still kind of doing skincare on the side as well, though. But I knew that was not my real passion. I enjoy working with people. I enjoy helping people, servicing people. But I knew I wanted to do it on when I wanted to do it, in the way that I wanted to do it. So I took a lot of my background experience working in customer service, sales, marketing, entrepreneurship. And that's how I started my executive assistant business, is just basically taking all the skills that I had learned throughout the years and really having a heart and a passion for helping people. Like when you strip Trenise to the core, she's all about service. She's all about helping people. She's all about, building people up, speaking life into people. And so I knew that I wanted to start a business where I could help business owners, because I saw that, being a business owner myself, we needed help with, setting up systems, back of the house things and stuff like that. And so that's what made me dive into entrepreneurship. And it has been very rewarding. I'm able to do it full time. Thank God. I've had this business now for 3 years. I'm doing it 100% full time, but it's not for the weak at all. Do you guys hear me? It is not. It takes a lot of dedication, consistency, motivation, drive, passion to do this every single day. The biggest challenge I would say for me is just staying consistent. When you stay consistent, you can do anything. And so I think it's just staying consistent, always understanding what is the end goal here. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for freedom, flexibility, right? So that I don't have to, depend on a job or be under somebody's guidelines of what I can and what I can't do, right? I want to be in control of my life. And so I think when you know what your why is, that helps you to keep going, And also, everybody is not meant to be an entrepreneur. It's not for everybody, it's not. So that's what I would say. How about you?
Yeah, so for me, I wasn't, the goal for me was never really to get into entrepreneurship. I was, working a 9-to-5. I had dreams of being a fashion buyer. I wanted to select, you know, the clothes and the pieces that go into different clothing stores. I wanted to get into buying. When I wanted to go down this path, it was because I was really inspired by a lot of the fashion shows in like the 2000s, like Project Runway. I remember The Hills and the City. Like Lauren Conrad, she worked at like this fashion firm. I thought that was so cool. I was like, I'm going to move to LA. I'm going to go do this. Like I just was really inspired by a lot of the, you know, TV. I think what was another show like America's Next Top Model. Just a lot of the fashion. I just was so in love with the fashion industry at that time. And still am. So I took the path of studying retail and consumer science, became a visual merchandiser. I worked my way up. I like most people who get into retail, you start as, you know, a cashier and you work your way, or a sales associate. You just and you kind of work your way up. And so that's what I was doing while I was going to school. And then when I left school, I kind of just continued to work on and climb up the ranks. I worked for H&M for over a decade. I started with the company when they were really doing their big U.S. expansion. So when they were first really expanding hardcore in the U.S., I was able to open up several stores out of state and then several stores in the Valley. So it was really cool. It was a really fun experience, and I learned a lot, and I loved dressing mannequins and styling and stuff like that. That's always been a passion of mine. My passion has been fashion, and I love that. And that's kind of why I started a fashion blog. So I started a Tumblr and just kind of just sharing my outfits and just like inspo. And it just was a fun little side hobby. I didn't really think anything of it because back then in the late 2000s, I mean, there wasn't really, the term influencer wasn't really a thing back then yet. Bloggers were becoming a big thing. People had blogs. YouTube was kind of starting out, especially when we kind of shifted into the 2010s. But the influencer didn't really become a huge thing until the late 2010s and then into like COVID, you know? So this whole idea of like being an influencer or posting online to make money just wasn't really a career path. So I didn't think that was a possible thing. So what made me kind of switch up was I just kept growing my following. You know, I went from Tumblr to Instagram, grew a micro following on Instagram, went on to TikTok, and TikTok was kind of like that big break for me. And so I started making money in...
Wait, TikTok back then?
TikTok in the during COVID. So I went...
Oh, really?
2020?
Oh. No, you said that was your big break.
Yeah, it was my big break.
Wow.
That was like viral for me. Yeah, that's when I became viral. Yeah, yeah.
I thought it was on Instagram. Okay.
No.
I didn't know TikTok. Okay.
No, yeah, so with Instagram, I started my Instagram account in 2017 and grew a micro following. This is before Reels was even a thing. The Reels didn't kick off, I think, until 2021 after, you know, TikTok started becoming a huge deal in the US. So with that being said, I grew my account to maybe 16,000 and hit a wall like most people did with Instagram. It just was one of those platforms where you just couldn't grow on there. So I obviously, like most people, I got furloughed from my job during COVID, couldn't work.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so I couldn't work. So like most people, got on TikTok, bored. Didn't have a job. So I started creating videos, and it kind of just took off from there. And then I had like my first big video, and it really did change the trajectory of my path. I didn't really think I could do influencing full time, even though I was making a little like side money from it. But then when I started getting bigger brand deals, signed to a talent agency, it really kicked off. And I was like, this is possible. And then when I was able to start making more from being an influencer than my 9-to-5, I was like, okay, maybe I could kind of think about maybe doing this as a full-time gig. And it's kind of been up from there. It's been a crazy It's been a crazy ride. It's been cool. It's been cool, but there's a lot of ebbs and flows in the industry. So I would just say that's like the biggest challenge with being a full-time influencer. Things change, algorithms change, platforms change. They come and go. If you look at Tumblr, it's not really a big thing anymore. You look at, all the changes Instagram has made over the years. I had friends who were doing influencing in the late 2010s and, before COVID, and they didn't really catch on to the short form video wave. They were very stuck in their ways. They're like, I'm not going to get on TikTok, that thing, and then a lot of them now don't even create content anymore because they couldn't really keep up with those changes. So there's a lot of ebbs and flows. You have to continuously be on your toes, and you have to go with the flow with trends and platform changes. So that is it can be very challenging to keep up with that. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart when it comes to that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I
agree. How do you feel your identity and background influence the way you approach business?
That's a really good question. I think for me, when I started, I didn't really have any thoughts. I didn't put any thought to it. It just was for fun. It really was for fun. I think now a lot of people, they see what you can do being a content creator. So a lot of people are more strategy. They're like, okay, I'm going to do this to be a creator. I was doing it as a hobby. As far as my identity, I knew back then that especially locally, there wasn't a lot of Black creators at the time, at least from what I could see, doing food and doing fashion and stuff like that. And I didn't really think much of it at the time. I was just like, I want to do this for fun and we'll see what happens. But yeah, that didn't really cross my mind really. Yeah.
I would say for me, I've always just been a go-getter. I've always been a natural born hustler. Maybe it's from working in sales, working in customer service. So to transition into entrepreneurship, being able to use those skills, because I had sales training, I had, customer service training, and I think being able to add that into business has really helped me a ton, right? Because you have to have those personable skills, you have to have those negotiating skills, you have to know all that to really be in business and to truly grow your business. And so I would say that would be it for me. What are some misconceptions people have about entrepreneurship? What would one be that you would say?
That it's easy. That you could just wake up at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock a.m. and not do anything.
That only works for so long. You take it from me, because I thought when I quit my job, I was like, woohoo, freedom. And I learned very quickly after a couple of months that there has to be some sort of structure in order to sustain your business. Even with being an influencer, you can't just, there has to be, especially when you're trying to make this a career, there is a little bit more strategy that has to go behind it. You do have to dive deeper into the analytics. You do have to see what's performing, what's not performing. You do have to pitch to brands and, not just wait for a brand to knock on your door. You have to do a lot of strategy behind that. And so, there has to be structure. I thought leaving a 9-to-5 would give me a ton of freedom, which it has in a lot of ways. It has given me so much freedom, but also there has to be some sort of structure to sustain what you are building. And that's something I had to learn very, very quickly, because the wheels will fall off quickly.
Yes. They will.
Yeah.
I would say for me that you can grow your business fast. I think that that's a big misconception, because that's not always true. Some people, they can grow it quickly. Other people, it may take time, to get there. And so I would say, again, consistency is number one. If you continue to show up for yourself, if you are, strategic in your thinking and, planning and things like that, you will start to see those results. But if you think just because you start a business or just because you start content creation, today, that you're going to have 150,000 followers tomorrow, or, you're going to have all this money tomorrow, that's just not true. You know, it takes time, and you have to be consistent in it. So I think that that's kind of one of the big misconceptions that I would say, is that I've seen people just think like, I'm just going to start this business, I'm going to put all this money in it, or I'm going to do this, and then they're very disappointed when 6 months or even a year later, they're not seeing the results that they would have liked, you know, because it takes time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 3 years into this business that I have now, and I'm just now feeling like I'm at a good spot where I'm like, okay, like I can kind of breathe now, you know, but it takes time, you know.
And then if you could go back and give your younger self advice about business, what would it be? Maybe just one thing. Like if you can give yourself some advice about starting your entrepreneurial or your content creation journey, or anyone who is, you know, thinking about getting into this.
Yeah, I would just say trust the process, and you know, it does take time. Nothing's overnight. You know, just to kind of bounce off that last point, I think we all see and we compare ourselves to other people, and we're like, I want that, I want to be in that position, and we don't know the years and the amount of time they've spent to get to that level. And I mean, there's a couple of like big creators who are YouTubers I follow that have said the same thing on, you know, a lot of people ask them about their success, and it took them years. It took them like over a decade, some of them, to get to that level to where they're going on these like very luxurious like beauty brand trips, you know, all the things that the perks that you get. So I would just say, you know, don't give up, you know, don't compare yourself, stay consistent on your path.
Yeah. I think for me, I would say understand your why. Understand why you want to start this business or be a content creator or entrepreneur. What's the reasoning behind this? Because once you identify your why and you understand, you know, your purpose, that's going to help you to really hone in on it and be consistent with it on days where, oh, you know, I just lost a client today, or oh, you know, things are just not looking the way that they were looking before. When you have that why in the back of your head, that's going to keep you going to say, you know what, maybe it was a bad day, maybe it was a bad week, but let me shake this off. Let me get back to the drawing board, and let me continue to, you know, build this business, or, you know, build whatever it is that you're building. So that's what I would say.